kill you both.
Bullshit.
I ain't shooting, mister.
Welcome to a time where law and order hung by a thread and outlaws ruled the rugged terrains of the Wild West. Here, the sound of gunfire was as common as the cawing of crows, and the clink of stolen gold echoed through desolate canyons. Ready to embark on an epic journey to the era of notorious gangs that roamed and ruled the frontier with fear and force? Buckle up as we gallop through the dusty trails of history, revealing the truth about the most violent gangs of the Wild West. The Wild, Wild West, setting the stage for America's most violent gangs. Wide open spaces stretch to the horizon. Gold rush fever fuels the air with excitement and promise, drawing in fortune seekers like a magnet. It's a place where opportunities seem boundless, but law and order, not so much. This terrain was as unpredictable as the people venturing into it. Cities popped up like mushrooms after a rain, born of gold, silver, and the prospect of a better life. And yet the law struggled to keep pace. The law enforcement officers of the time were few, their jurisdiction was thin. A boomtown could turn into a ghost town in the blink of an eye. And America's most violent gangs were born in this environment, this space that danced between lawlessness and opportunity. You've heard their names: the Dalton Gang, Jesse James and his outlaws, Butch Cassidy, and the Sundance Kid. Their tales are steeped in notoriety, their actions marked by a brutality that shook the very foundations of the fledgling communities out west. By the 1860s, the United States had expanded to the Pacific. Westward expansion, driven by manifest destiny, saw over 200,000 people move west in covered wagons. But what isn't so widely known is this. With that mass migration came the rise of outlaw gangs eager to carve out their piece of the pie by any means necessary. Guns and gold, the rise of outlaw gangs in the Wild West. Imagine the clink of gold nuggets, the glint of untapped wealth, and the promise of new beginnings. The Gold Rush 1849 sparked a wave of excitement that had folks packing their lives into wagons, dreaming of striking it rich. But let's not forget, where there's gold, there's often greed. And in the Wild West, that deadly duo gave birth to outlaw gangs, who took the phrase finders keepers to a new level. For these gangs, gold wasn't the only currency. Power and fear were just as valuable. Gold promised wealth, but guns promised to control. The lack of established law enforcement created a vacuum, and men like Jesse James, Butch Cassidy, and the Dalton brothers stepped into that space. Gangs emerged from the shadowy fringes of these rapidly expanding towns, driven by the allure of quick wealth and the thrill of the fight. Real-life shootouts, bank robberies, and train heists. These gangs stole nearly $50 million in gold, silver, and other valuable minerals from the mid-1850s until the late 1880s. $50 million. What a quick-rich scheme. Wealth wasn't everything. No, these gangs had a knack for exploiting the chaos and uncertainty of the time. They manipulated the people's distrust of the law, played into the stereotypes of the gunslinging outlaw, and in doing so created their form of twisted order. Gold in the ground, guns in hand, and gangs rising from the shadows. The deadly Daltons, bank robbers, train robbers, and ruthless killers. Let's turn the clock back to the late 19th century when a family of brothers terrorized the Wild West. Their name still rings with infamy: the Dalton Gang. Born to a life of farming, these brothers chose a different path. Their deadly legacy was etched into the annals of Wild West history through the smoke of their guns and the echo of their robberies. Initially working on the right side of the law as lawmen, they quickly realized that being outlaws was more lucrative. Hold on to your hats, folks, because their audacious exploits are bound to make your head spin. The Dalton Gang didn't just rob one or two banks. No, they aimed higher. Infamously, they attempted to rob two banks simultaneously in their hometown of Coffeyville, Kansas. Talk about biting the hand that feeds you. Their boldness was astounding. During their reign of terror, they committed over a dozen robberies and were responsible for several killings. Their notoriety grew with each daring exploit, and Dalton became synonymous with fear and violence in the Wild West. And how about this for a fact that'll knock your socks off? Despite their notorious reputation, the Daltons had a strange allure. Some saw them as Robin Hood-like figures. The botched Coffeyville robbery in 1892 marked the end of the Dalton Gang's reign. Two of the brothers, Grattan and Bob, were killed. Emmett survived, but not without serving a hard time. An embodiment of the brutal and bloody spirit of the Wild West. They lived by the gun, and as the saying goes, died by it. Jesse James and his outlaw crew, the fear of the frontier. A name that stirred fear in the heart of the frontier, James and his gang of outlaws became the embodiment of the lawlessness that pervaded the Wild West. Born in Missouri in 1847, James took up arms as a teenage Confederate guerrilla during the Civil War. But when peace arrived, Jesse and his brother Frank didn't lay down their guns. They turned them instead towards a new kind of warfare, one marked by bank and train robberies and streaked with violence. Let's put some numbers to this tale of notoriety. Over 15 years, the James Younger Gang, as they were known, are believed to have robbed 20 banks and dozens of trains, making away with an estimated $200,000. That's a staggering amount of money for the time. And let's not overlook the aura of fear they cast. Jesse James was known for his cruelty. His reputation for brutality made his presence terrifying. Ironically, this criminal also captivated the people. He was compared to Robin Hood, robbing the affluent and helping those in need. Jesse James left a lasting imprint on the Wild West, reality or fiction. Every action has repercussions. Guys, a gang member betrayed James and killed him. Jesse James was shot in the back of the head at home, ending his frightening history. Jesse James' story illustrates the Wild West's brutality. The Wild Bunch, Butch Cassidy, and the Sundance Kid's reign of terror. Featuring the notorious Wild Bunch bandit group and its leaders, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. These two outlaws made Wild West history with their daring and charm. Butch Cassidy was a unique outlaw. Cassidy liked cleverness above harshness. Harry Longabob, the Sundance Kid, was known for his rapid draw and sharpshooting. They tormented the West in the early 20th century as a duet. A band that evaded the cops, daylight bank and train robberies, and dramatic state line chase. They were supposedly the most successful train thieves in history, stashing nearly $200,000 in their largest crime. These weren't cold-blooded murders. Their style was more about panache and audacity and less about unnecessary violence. Interestingly, they had a code: no killing unless necessary. Unusual for a gang of outlaws. Their charm and brazen acts turned them into folk heroes. Their exploits captured the public's imagination, and they became the stuff of legends. But remember, folks' legends often meet grim ends in the Wild West. With increasing pressure from law enforcement, Cassidy and Sundance fled to South America, hoping to leave their past behind. Shrouded in mystery, their end was reportedly a violent shootout in Bolivia. Their legend, however, lives on. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid are two names that continue to echo through the corridors of time, defining an era when outlaws were both feared and admired. The underrated violence of lesser-known Wild West gangs. As we journey through the annals of Wild West history, let's shine a light on the lesser-known yet equally ruthless gangs. They might not have garnered as much fame as Jesse James or Butch Cassidy, but their tales are no less wild or violent. First up, we have the Doolin-Dalton Gang. Led by Bill Doolin and Bill Dalton, this gang was notorious for their bold bank and train robberies across Kansas and Oklahoma. They stole $175,000 in over a dozen heists between 1891 and 1898. The three guardsmen launched a fierce hunt that ended their rule. Then we have the Rufus Buck Gang, a crew of outlaws consisting of multiracial members, which was relatively rare then. Led by Rufus Buck, their crime spree lasted just over 2 weeks in 1895, but the wave of violence and terror they unleashed was memorable enough to carve their names into the darker side of Wild West history. The legendary Hole in the Wall Gang must also not be forgotten. This informal gang of outlaws, which often included Butch Cassidy, committed several robberies throughout the West. These gangs may not have been as famous as the Daltons or the James Younger Gang, but their stories show that the Wild West was a lawless region where violence was a way of life. Echoes of Gunfire, the enduring legacy of the Wild West gangs. As we leave the dangerous Wild West, reflect on these gangs' lasting impact. Books, movies, and TV shows romanticize their tales. But why? What draws us to these lawbreakers? It could be their rawness, their independence amid a period of fast change and development. They defied the law and symbolized insurrection. They lived their own dangerous, unpredictable, and often brief lives. The Wild West lasted 30 years, but these criminal groups' legacy has lasted over 100 years. While the age of the Wild West gang is long past, the allure of these notorious outlaws remains. They continue to inspire tales of adventure, reminding us of a time when law and order were often decided by the speed of a draw and the accuracy of a shot. Their stories have shaped American history and mythology. However, don't forget the truth beneath the idealized facade. Violence and terror fueled these guys. Greed and power drove them. They caused mass murder and horror. Please subscribe to our channel and press the like button if you like this trip and want to continue exploring the past with us. Keep exploring the history and listening to the radio for more exciting stories from the past.